We are in the middle of a short series called Who is God? If a couple of weeks ago we had the first week of that, and you can always find that message on the YouTube channel and watch it again if you want to. And we just talked about a few things last time about just basically how God revealed himself to humanity from the beginning. We were in Genesis and talked about how he interacted with people in the very beginning and some of the earlier people who followed him and how they knew him. And we kind of ended by noting that that there is only one God. You know, we kind of went around a lot of scriptures that just point out that God is very special. You know, he's really, really unique, right? He's one of a kind. And this morning, and I had mentioned to you at the end of that last service that, you know, when you read through the stories in the Bible, you see that there's a lot of gods talked about. Because people that don't believe in Jesus or in the one God that is the God of the Bible, they come up with other gods to serve, right? And when you read, especially in the Old Testament, there's a lot more content, but it's also in the New Testament, where you see people worshiping other types of gods, other things that are man-made things. And that's what I wanted to talk about this morning, is who is God? This is part 2. And we're going to read in Daniel chapter 2 as I get there. And this story, the backstory here, is that, and I didn't put his name on the screen. I should have, because if you saw it, it would be easier to understand. But there's a king in Daniel chapter 2, and the story revolves around this dream that he had, and his name is Nebuchadnezzar. So I know that's a tough word to say, but it's a really long word. I won't spell it for you. But you can find it in the book of Daniel here, and we see that this is a kingdom of Babylon. Would be in your secular history books too. It's not just biblical history in this part. And this guy ruled the kingdom of Babylon, and it was a pretty expansive kingdom, comparable. There's major kingdoms throughout human history, and some of them are comparable in size, and Babylon is one of those. And you know, the Roman Empire would be one you may be familiar with, and you know, there's several others, the Greek Empire and whatnot. And so in this particular time, Daniel is a believer in the only God that there is, all right, the God that we worship. And this king, this king has a dream in this chapter. And I think a lot of times when we preach out of this passage, we're preaching about future prophetic events. We're preaching about Daniel's interpretation and, you know, kind of the things that he prophesied that the Lord showed him that would happen after him. And it's a pretty incredible book. Daniel was a pretty incredible person, but at the end of it all, really all he was a believer in God who made God a priority in his life, and he listened to the things that God spoke to him. And so Daniel did receive some revelation about things, and he did share it for us to read now thousands of years later, and it all happened, just like he said, way after he died, hundreds of years after. We watched history play out just like Daniel said it would, which is pretty incredible, but it wasn't Daniel saying that he would. And as I was thinking about this yesterday, I was thinking, you know, sometimes we use the wrong word to describe things that God does. Like, Daniel didn't predict anything. Nobody in the kingdom of God predicts anything. He prophesied, which is a whole different thing, and the reason why is that when you prophesy, you're not using this. You're not using what you know. You're not smarter than anybody else. All you are is a vessel that God is pouring into and a mouthpiece that he pours out of. So God showed Daniel some things. He showed him, and Daniel spoke them. And that's what happened in this book, and that's what makes it so special. Predictions are just like gambling or something, right? I mean, are you some special person because you rolled the dice and they landed on a certain number, as if you had any control in that at all, right? We like to act like we're big shots. We're going to predict this or that, or we're watching the sports game and we're going to say the next guy's going to do this or that. You know, you might have gotten lucky a time or two. This next guy's going to hit a home run, and then it happens, right? It's happened. I mean, if you watch enough sports, it's going to happen. Does that mean that you really had a hand in it? No. That's silliness, right? But in the world that we live in, everybody's obsessed with predictions. Oh, somebody predicted this, predicted that. And the Bible isn't full of predictions. The Bible is full of the Word of God, right? And there's another king, before we get to Nebuchadnezzar, you may have heard of him, his name was Solomon. And in the scriptures, it says that Solomon received wisdom from God. And before I get to this, I'll tell you this little bit about him. He had great wealth, great knowledge. He was an inventor of things. He was very successful, and he had it all. And he made, I was reading some scriptures earlier, that he made gold. You know, you have like silver, bronze, silver, and gold. We're in the Olympics right now, gold is the premium, right? He made gold like it was nothing. Like it didn't even matter. It was so common in his day. He had so much of it that it wasn't even a big deal in his day. And, yesterday we were, I drugged my wife, who was not the lady that was here that day, by the way, although you could make a case that she is stronger than me, but just saying, in many, many ways. But I drug her out to just pick up a little bit of firewood, because how many of you like helping your husband get firewood? Raise your hand. Is there any other women in here? I think I saw one hand. And so we're walking, and I pulled up, and we're walking up, and she starts to grab this little piece out of this pile. I said, "No, I don't want that." And she's like, "Why don't you want that? It's right here. It's closest to the truck." And I said, "I don't want that kind of wood. That's not what I came here for. That's a different kind of wood." And she's like, "Well, won't it burn? Don't you want to get it?" And I said, and then I quoted her this Solomon verse, and I said, "When you have access to gold, why do you want this other stuff? I don't even bother with it. I didn't come for this other, like, scraps over here, when I have a gold mine right here. Let's get the good stuff." When we open up the Bible, we get gold. This is what we came to church for, is to hear the Word. We get to hear it right out of the Scriptures here this morning, and we get to hear it through the ministry of the Spirit in our next service in the worship time. And this is the premium stuff, right? I mean, this is to be cherished. This is why we serve God, is when He speaks, it matters. It changes our lives, it changes our future, and He shows us things and ways that we need to be in the coming days. So we get to Daniel chapter 2, and I just wanted to read a passage here, but what happened is this King Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, he had a dream in this passage. And, I encourage you to go home and read the entire book of Daniel. It's only a few chapters. But he has a dream, and he asks the people that predict things in his kingdom, he asks the magicians and the sorcerers and whoever, the wise men of his day, to tell him what the dream was, because he didn't believe they would give him a real answer. If he told him the dream first, they would make up an answer and say, "This is what the dream means." And that's what they tried to do in the story. But he ups it a notch. He says, "I don't want you to tell me what the dream means. I want you to tell me what my dream was." He didn't tell him what he saw in his dream. And so as the story goes, in the chapters here, nobody could tell the king what he had dreamed, right? Now, usually when you wake up, you tell somebody the dream that you had. And they don't usually tell you the dream that you had, right? I mean, that would be pretty crazy. So what Daniel does, and as the story goes, the king was so mad, he said, "If nobody can do it, I'm gonna execute all the wise men because they're worthless." That's basically what he said. Daniel is in prison. He is in that category of people at the time. There's a reason why he was there, for no fault of his own. And he prays and says to God, "I need to know what this dream is." He prays and asks the Lord to reveal the dream to him that the king had, and the Lord does. And so he ends up revealing the dream to the king, and of course, as you read on in the story, you see that worked. And what we're reading here is in Daniel chapter 2, verse 45. And so the king saw all these things. I'm gonna actually go up a few verses here. What the king saw was a series of kingdoms, and that's what I shared with you already. You know, we had the kingdom of Babylon. After that was the kingdom of the Medes and Persians, and this is in your secular history book at school if you read it. After that, you had the kingdom of Greece, which was Alexander the Great. Then you had the Roman Empire. And then there's some other kingdoms mentioned in here, another kingdom that hasn't happened. But what happens is Daniel begins to describe these kingdoms that the king saw in his dream. And it was all kind of, pictures and, descriptive things. It wasn't so easy to understand what he was saying. So he interprets the dream, and he says in verse, in verse 39, I'll read a few verses here. He says, "But after you shall arise another kingdom inferior than another, a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything, and like iron that crushes. And that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others." Verse 41, "Whereas you saw the feet and toes partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. Yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay." So he sees this picture of a warrior, and it's got different pieces, different materials in each part of his body, and those represented different kingdoms in order. Verse 42, "The toes of the feet were partly of iron, partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. As you saw iron mixed with clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay." He's describing a final kingdom on the earth here. In verse 44, "And in the days of these kings," okay, he described 4 kingdoms beginning with where Daniel was standing in his lifetime. The kingdom of Babylon. "In the days of these kings," that was the first kingdom. There were 3 others after mentioned. "The God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed." Now, does that sound way far out to you? Or does that sound like it might be kind of soon? Because he described 4 kingdoms in his day. 3 had not happened, but in our day, 4 have already happened and completed. And that left one final kingdom. When you read the story, you see the iron mixed with clay that we haven't seen yet on the earth. And the Bible says, in the days of these kings, so there's only one left to be seen, all right? So you get what I'm saying? If that king comes and goes, the scripture wouldn't be true if the Lord doesn't do what he said. So there's one more kingdom. We're at the very end of time, and I don't know if people realize that, and I don't know if believers even realize it. I'm pretty sure the average person that wakes up today doesn't realize what God's plan is for the earth and for people on the earth. But this is what his word says. "In the days of these kings," verse 44, "the God of heaven will set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever." Verse 45, this was our verse of our message today. "Inasmuch as you saw that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands," he saw this scene play out in his dream, "and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, and the silver, and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure." So, Lord, we thank you today for your word, and we just pray that you would reveal things to us so that we can understand the things that you have already spoken. In Jesus' name, Lord. Amen. So God is describing to us that he is going to bring a kingdom in the last days, if you want to use that term, that will basically just demolish all the other kingdoms of the world. And in a nutshell, what happens is every other kingdom is made by man, is built by mankind, is created with things that they did not create, because we can't create anything. God made it all. And there's coming a day in the days of these kingdoms that were even listed here, which we are nearing the end. God will set up his kingdom that will break in pieces every other thing. He will obliterate everything man has done and set up a kingdom, the Bible says, that will last forever. And we know as believers, and if we've read the Bible and seen the plan of God that unfolds for us, we know that Jesus Christ himself will be the king of that kingdom. And it is an eternal kingdom, and we're watching it take place. It's an exciting time to be alive. But the God that we serve is not made with human hands. And every other kingdom is made with human hands. The kingdom of Babylon, they pride themselves on the things that they did in their era. You know, the kingdoms of Medes and Persians, the Greek kingdom, they prided themselves on putting Greek culture and all those statues. If anybody's been to Europe before, you go to these tourist cities, anywhere really, and they're covered in statues, covered in them, of all kinds, artwork and all of this. And the kingdoms of this world, that's what they produce. They produce things made with hands, the human hands. But God is promising us a kingdom that isn't. In fact, Acts 7:48 says, however, the Most High does not dwell in temples, not even in the temple. He doesn't dwell in temples made with hands. And, you know, I was thinking about it. God doesn't live here at night. Now, anybody ever been down here at night before? It's actually not a place that you really want to be. I'm just going to be honest with you. It's a little bit weird sometimes down here at night. Not just because we're in West Linda, because that can get crazy too. But see, I used to live right next door here for like 6 years, and I would come down late and prepare for different ministries I was involved in, and I'd walk home at night. And there were times when I'd be down here by myself, and it's midnight, 11, 12 o'clock. And it's just not the same when you're not here. This building isn't really a cool place to be in by itself. It's a little eerie. It creaks when the wind blows. You're thinking, like, man, what's going on around here? Is this place going to fall on my head? The Bible says that God doesn't dwell in the temple made with hands. He's not in the wood, right? He's here today, in a sense, and we know God is everywhere. We know he can reveal himself at anywhere, all times, at any place. But he dwells where believers gather together. That's what his word says. And where they gather in his name, that's why when believers gather together, there he is. He only lives here when his people are here. This really isn't a very spiritual place after hours. In a couple of hours, this parking lot will be empty, and it'll just be a place where squirrels are running around and random cats eating gophers in the field, and just like very unspiritual things go on here, right? Acts 17:24 says, God, who made the world and everything in it, since he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands. I remember visiting a temple made with hands. My wife and I, when we first got married, we did take a trip overseas, and we were in some city, and everywhere you go, there are these great temples made with hands, some of them still standing after hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's like, wow, that's interesting, but they're all kind of deteriorated looking and nothing special about it. Everybody with their cell phones, taking selfies, taking pictures, that's all it is. I went to I think it was the Pantheon in Rome, and you're taking these great photos, and then you turn around, there's a McDonald's, like right there. And they had shrimp on the menu. I was like, what is this place? That's crazy. So God, he's not in the temple made with hands. Acts 9, and we're going somewhere with this. Acts 19:26, he says, you see and hear that not only at Ephesus, but throughout almost all Asia, and he says this Paul, he's talking about Paul, the apostle, has persuaded and turned away many people, saying they are not gods which are made with hands. All right? So all the stuff that we see, sometimes in America, we might forget this. You go to other countries and you see things that look like what we would say are idols, things that are carved. In the Ten Commandments, when God laid out the Ten Commandments, originally in Exodus chapter 20. You can read about that. That was a guideline, a framework of behavior. There were some things he needed to set in order. And he said, don't make a carved image to worship. So apparently that's just like a thing that people do. Maybe we don't feel that way on a daily basis. Maybe we don't get up and say, let me see what I can create and physically bow down and worship. But in other places of the world, it's really that simple. Not everywhere. And, sometimes you might see it even here. You go out to eat in a restaurant in town and you see a little carved image on the back in the counter behind the cash register. I see that often around here. But we may not think about what that is and how we worship God, but he spends a lot of time reminding us that he is not in the things that we create with our own effort and our own hands. He is not dwelling in those things. Now, I'm very, 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 very thankful that we got that material on the roof, brother. But at the end of the day, it's just a roof, right? And it is nice. It'll be really nice in the wintertime when it's raining out there and it's not raining in here anymore, huh? That will be really nice. Because a couple of years ago, I went out and I bought like 15 5-gallon buckets that were matching so I could line them up on that ridge right there every time it rained because we needed them all. But at the end of the day, if God's not here, this place isn't special, whether it has a new roof or not. The reason why we want to put a roof on it is because we want to meet here and worship him. And we want to make a place for the one God so he will dwell among us and minister to us. And so it's important to have the roof because we have our focus in the right spot. 2 Corinthians 5:1 says, "For we know that if our earthly house, this tent, is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens." Eternal in the heavens. If we were alive back in Daniel's day, we would have been a part of one of those kingdoms. He was actually crossed over into two of them. In his era, you could say, you saw two kingdoms come about. And we would have been a part of that, and it would have been a temporary kingdom. A pastor mentions before many times that he's spoken about, the average lifespan of world powers. You've heard that in some of his sermons in Pastor Al over the years. And, it's somewhere around 200 years or something like that. And you watch these kingdoms and you see them unfold, and there's maps online you can look at to see how much of the earth they controlled, and it looks pretty impressive. But then there comes a time when it begins to fall apart. And then it begins to shrink back, and what was once a great kingdom that ruled the earth with the ideas of men and the work of their hands becomes nothing, and someone else comes in and just completely takes it over, and the whole cycle repeats again. God is promising us something that is not made with human hands. He's promising us a kingdom that will last forever, and he's promising us a building in our spirit. This tent, this temporary house, this physical body, as many of us know, is breaking down, unfortunately. I spend half of my time making excuses for how broken down I am to people I meet. There were some new guys out there, and I feel so bad for them because I'm watching them do what I want to do, and I can't do it. And then I'm thinking, well, they must think I'm just some lazy bum out here, walking around. So I spend half my time telling everybody how much I can't do, right? Isn't that silly? I just want them to know that I really care about what we're doing, and if I could, I would do everything I could. I did lift one thing, and I said, I was good. I think I'll quit right there. But I'm not looking for this body to last forever. I know it's not going to. It's okay, because God has something that is eternal that's not made with hands. And he's got a kingdom that I can be a part of with a resurrected body that isn't going to deteriorate, isn't going to be subject to someone else's ideas on what they think I should do or say or look like. But he will be the king, and it will last forever. So in America, we do have some idols. And this is something that has to be preached often in our society, because I'm going to paint us a picture here of kind of how we live, and I just want us to see it from God's perspective. we talked about how much gold there was in Solomon's day. And I think we're similar to that. We've been similar to that over the years. And I lived in a generation where I could decide what I wanted to do and do it. I could decide what I wanted to purchase and purchase it. I could plan for something and just get it. There really wasn't much in my generation that was unavailable. And many of you are in that same boat. In America, we just kind of dream and we think about what we want and then we go get it. I mean, that's kind of a part of our makeup, I guess. In the midst of that pursuit, though, we have to just be careful. This isn't a message against things. Things are just things. They don't have any emotional value. They don't have any motive or anything. They're just stuff. But what we want to look at is our relationship with God and the value that we are placing in these things and the value we're placing on Him. We have some idols. You could just pick things that you care about a lot and just start there. Not that they're all idols, but just let's go through some things here. Because we worship things in America. We worship houses, cars, boats, bank accounts. I could make a huge list, right? It could be anything. None of these things are eternal, yet we work for them a lot, don't we? We work for them a lot. Rich was up here talking earlier. He's like, I got these different options. I got to do this or I got to do that. Another option is just to let it go, right? That's where I've been lately. I've been like, I quit watering my lawn so I wouldn't have to mow it. And I'm like, why didn't I think of this earlier? And I save money on my water bill. I mean, this is like, duh, right? I mean, I'm halfway serious here, but if you saw my water bill, you're like, yeah, that's a good idea. But we work for things a lot. And maybe I'm not saying we don't love God. We got to work, we got to eat, we got to survive, we got to, do things. And it's good to dream and it's good to have nice things. Many men and women of God in the Bible dreamed, have nice things. Nothing wrong with that. But let's just take a look, given the timing of God's plan, how He said, I'm about to do something eternal. I'm about to do something forever. I'm about to eliminate the way that people have been living on this earth for thousands of years, and I'm going to put some finality to it. If we really knew that that was coming, which He doesn't give us a time and a date, like an actual second and say it's going to happen tomorrow. But if we really lived like we knew that was imminent, what would change in our lives? Now, nobody can answer that for you. I can't answer it for you. I can't tell you what to change. But I'm thinking of myself looking at how our society lives, right? We work for things made with human hands. We work hard for it. We work long hours for it. Anybody ever, I don't need a show of hands, but anybody ever had to work some long hours so you could get a thing? Especially today, because everything's so expensive. We got to work overtime to get a thing. Not just one day. We got to live this way for years and years and years because we got to pay for our things that we want that people make. Now, think about storage units. This one actually made me laugh. It's one of the fastest growing businesses in America in the last few years. But I wrote down some stats here that I just was like, wow, I had no idea. If I would have known this, man, I would have invested in storage units years ago. I probably missed the window now. But check this out. The average occupancy of storage units, like if you go to any one of them, is 96%. They're almost all full, any one that you go to. This is just a national average. 90% of worldwide self-storage inventory is in the United States. So if you're wondering how we live differently than the rest of the world, this is a nice little picture just that kind of captures what we value. 90% of the self-storage industry is here. Why? Because we will not get rid of our stuff. We got to have it. We got to have more. We got to have more than we have room for. We have to put it somewhere because we can't get rid of it. 65% of all self-storage renters already have a garage. Hey, if you need somewhere to store your stuff, Rich Nacarelli has a piece of property he was talking about, and I think there might be room. Just come in the back gate. I got a dump trailer. You can just hit the button. It's gone. This is how we live in America. In 2024, this is, I guess, an estimate since we're in the middle. The annual revenue of self-storage is at $44 billion, and 90% of that is in America. We might have a problem. We might have a problem. And you know what? I have a problem. You know why? Gen Xers use self-storage more than any other group. I'm sorry. I represent that generation today. I'm not a fan, though, because I don't want to pay the bill, right? Over the past 40 years, the self-storage industry has been one of the fastest growing sectors of the U.S. James is happy about that. It's just a snapshot of the way of life in our nation. We like to consume. We like to have. We like to work to have. We like to sacrifice to have. We might spend $100 a month for years storing stuff that isn't worth anything. If you spend $100 a month for 5 years, it's $6,000. What do you got in that storage unit? Some old papers, a scrapbook, Let's move on. Sometimes we have some idols. Sometimes we have things that we worship with our time, with our money, with our emotions, with our thought life. We have things that are at the highest priority in our life, and it's not God. That makes it an idol. It don't matter what it is. It could be your cell phone. It could be your book collection. It could be anything that takes away your affections of your heart from the Lord. The idols, they dictate how we spend our time. They dictate how we work, how much we work, where we work. They dictate our sleep schedules. I mean, think about some of the things that we go through just to have what we have. Is there another way somehow? They dictate our budgets. They control our finances and our giving. Wow. I am going to touch on giving, Rich, because I can. It's in the Bible. And we know how the church works. And if you've been at New Life or any church long enough, you probably have noticed that there are things that have to be paid for. Things like the lights and the janitor to clean things. And he mentioned the toilets when they break. You know, we like to have plumbing. I mean, there's things that cost. There's just stuff, just like any other campus. When we are putting in priority on these other things in life, it affects our ability to serve God and to serve the house of God in His name. They dictate our finances and our giving. Sometimes we get ourselves in a bind. We get ourselves in debt. We get ourselves overcommitted to a lifestyle. And then we have to scramble and race around and chase it the rest of our lives. We never catch it, by the way. We never catch it. Whether we are making $20,000 a year, 50, 100, or $1 million, we're living this chase around life to try to chase this new standard of living. We can't ever be satisfied. And if we ever have more money than we have space for, we just go buy a storage unit. And we put all the extra stuff in there because we just got to get it. But what I'm trying to point out today is that there's a way of life that's happening, and if we're not careful, we get sucked into this. We get sucked into this vacuum of living in America where it just, everybody goes to the same place. And we're stuck in this rat race, and I believe the Bible shows us that we don't have to live like that in our hearts. Now, we can't always control what's happening around us. We're in a situation right now in this country that makes it tight. Things are tight to live in, right? Things are expensive. I mean, everything's up. And God knows this. And He is watching, and He's going to see us through it. But He's more concerned about the eternal kingdom than He is about the kingdom made with hands. The eternal kingdom is found in our heart when we believe in Him. Now we're born again. We're born into something that is eternal, something that's special, something that cannot be replaced by anything that we can create. We get stuck in the rat race. We get stuck on this trail. It's really a trail of idolatry, but nobody wants to hear that word today, but that's what the Bible says that it is. And we all have to be careful about this. It affects how we spend our money. It affects the decisions that we make when we're faced with two things and only $1. What do? How do we make our choices? How do we make our financial choices? How do we decide, do I obey the Word of God? Do I invest in His kingdom? Do I honor Him with my first fruits like the Bible teaches? Do I do that, or do I just say I have to buy this other thing? God's trying to get our attention inside, in our hearts here. It's never, never, never a burden to live life the way that God says to live. It's not a burden. If it's a burden, then we're doing something wrong. If it's squeezing me to get me to do what God told me to do with my finances, then I've got something going on in my heart I need to deal with Him. You probably don't even need a meeting with your pastor. You just need a meeting at the prayer closet in your bedroom, or some alone time with the Lord, and maybe some time in the Scriptures to just evaluate and say, okay, why does this bother me so much, right? We talk about how these things, how these idols, how they affect how we raise our kids. Rich mentioned New Life School. Man, you know the heritage of our school, just so you know, and our school isn't for everybody. And that's okay for me to say. I love our school, and it's great for who it's meant for. But you know what? There's people that are going to find a different path, and there's nothing wrong with that. We couldn't put every kid in this community at our school. We only have seats for probably 200 and something kids. But I do know this, that the heritage of the school was built on people who were hearing something from the Lord, and they were drawn to put their children here for a reason, right? And the way that they accomplished that was through sacrifice. The way that they accomplished it was saying, you know what? I have a choice to make. I have two things I could spend $1 on, and I can't cut it in half. What am I going to do? This school was kind of built on people driving old vehicles. Why? Because that's what it took in that day to get your kid to school. It took a choice. Do I want a car payment, or do I want to put my kid here? And you know, it's okay if you don't, but if you know you should, see, that's where God gets involved. When we know the good that we ought to do and we don't do it, you know what the Bible calls that? He says that's what sin is. When we know the good that we ought to do and we don't do it. If the Lord is putting it on your heart to have a child at New Life Christian School, there is a way to make room for that. There's a way to make room for it. And it's been modeled for us, but we have to be willing to do it. We have to be willing to say, I'm not going to invest in a thing at the expense of being obedient to the Word of God. If God hasn't told you to bring your family to the school, then you don't have that decision. It's no big deal, right? We have people in this community whose kids don't have the basics. Many children in this community don't have food. They don't have adequate clothing, right? We see it all the time. But then we see many parents who are spending money on other things, aren't they? We see it all the time. They're spending money on themselves, on the things that they want. Some of them may be detrimental to their health, but they're investing their money into the things made with hands instead of into the gift of God to them and their children. There's a way of life, and it affects all demographics. It don't matter if you have any money, or it don't matter if you have $1 million. God's looking for a way of life here for your heart that He can get in there. None of these things are eternal, but sometimes they prevent us from gathering even here. Think about this one. It's funny, Rich, your testimony. I didn't know what you were going to say this morning, your announcements, but this is funny. We're talking about yard work. Would you ever trade catching up on yard work to attend a worship service? Have you ever thought about it? And if I were to ever even suggest that, what would it do to you? What would it do to you? Does that irk you a little bit? And you guys know me. I'm not trying to put anything on you today, but let's just throw some things out there, right? How about a special gathering on a Friday night or a Saturday? Is there something that you've reserved that is just untouchable, and you say, I'm in this rat race because I want to have this, I want to be this, I want to be seen as this, I want to be known for this? And then God comes in and he says, what if I asked you to serve me here? Could you do it? Could you give up your favorite TV show? Could you give up that thing that you do that isn't necessary for your survival? I don't know what it is, and I'm not asking you to give anything up. I'm just asking you the question. There's one notable day out of the week that we reserve to have the entire church gather, and here it's Sunday. We have a Sunday morning, you know. This is it, right? How sacred is this meeting in your heart? How sacred is it in your heart? Is this the focal point of your Sunday morning? Or do you spend half the time, even when I'm preaching and when the worship is going on, thinking about all the stuff that you need to accomplish made with human hands? You see how God is more interested in what's inside here? He comes and dwells among us, and he chooses to do it here every Sunday morning, and I'm a witness to that. He's here, and he ministers to us all in a special way every Sunday morning. I mean, it's a beautiful thing to watch. He has no limits. He can address every situation. Look across this room right now. Everybody just look around for a minute. You don't see a twin, do you? Well, some of you might. My kids aren't in here. Everybody is different. We're all different. And when God ministers to our heart, he brings a word for us. It affects us. It's tailor-made specifically for us, where we sit this morning. And this group of people right here, all of us, this variety, we lift up the name of Jesus in worship, and the Spirit of God ministers to us right where we are. Do we understand how much value God places on ministering to us, and are we offering him that same value, thinking about being in the house of God on a Sunday morning? How many of people in the world reserve this day to God? Now, it doesn't have to be Sunday, but we do it on Sunday, because if I didn't tell you what day, nobody would know when to come, right? So we know Sunday, and that's just what we do here. But how many people in the world today have a heart that is invested in the things of God first, or would they rather be somewhere else with somebody else doing something else? And that's where God is the discerner of the thoughts, and the Bible says the intent of our heart. Nobody else can see that but God. Nobody can say anything about you or me or anybody, because we can only see what you allow us to see. You dress a certain way, you talk a certain way, you show up at certain things, you represent certain things in life and whatever. But the Bible says that God, he discerns the thoughts and the intent of your heart. We all show up on a Sunday to church, but God knows who came here to worship him. Think about that. You can't fool him. You can't get around it. He knows the intent of your heart today. So 2 final scriptures as I close. Hebrews 9, verse 11. This is what Jesus does right here. But Christ came as a high priest of the good things to come. There's a forever kingdom. I'm going to say it because God said it. I'm going to be his mouthpiece and just speak the word. There's a forever kingdom, and it is right around the corner. Christ came as a high priest of the good things to come with the greater and more perfect tabernacle. Guess what the next part says? Not made with hands. That is not of this creation. God is offering people something just amazing, something special, something he has designed for us to inherit. And it's nothing like what we see. It's nothing that is going to be disappointing. It's nothing going to be temporary. It's not just going to be empty words. It's not going to be people saying one thing and doing another. All of the things that we deal with when we interact with other human beings, God says, I'm coming with a forever kingdom, and it's perfect. Hebrews 9:24 says, "For Christ has not entered the holy places made with hands, which are copies of the true, but into heaven itself." Now, what does now mean? It means now, doesn't it? Now. We're talking about what time is it? Well, how do you know this is talking about today? Because it says now. Christ enters into heaven itself now to appear in the presence of God for us. For us. Are we waiting for his return as much as he's waiting for us to reach out to him? As much as he's waiting for an invitation to come back? This is what God thinks about us. You know, the Bible shows us what Jesus did, how he died on the cross for the sins of the whole world. But it didn't stop there. It says that he fulfilled all of the prophecy, not predictions, but prophecy, the things that God had already spoke. Jesus fulfilled it all. And he was buried and he rose again in 3 days. This is where the power is in the resurrection. And after he appeared to many, even hundreds of people in his day, to attest to his resurrection, he ascended to the right hand of the Father, and he comes again, and it says that while he's there, he now appears in the presence of God for us. This is what Jesus is all about right now. He's all about us right now in heaven. He is standing in between for us right now in heaven, whatever we're going through. Every situation imaginable on this planet, and we have an advocate named Jesus Christ standing there for us. He's got his priorities in order. He's not overly concerned with the things that we create, but he is concerned with us because he created us. You know, I think when we're talking about who is God, one of the revelations we need to walk in is that we are not him. We are not God. You know what really irks me is that little phrase, you see athletes do it. They say, "I'm him," because they're so prideful. They put a ball in a net, "I'm him." Like, bro, I've been doing that since the 3rd grade. I've been playing basketball a long time. That's not a special thing you just did. You put the ball in the hoop. Come to New Life Christian School, you'll see it every day. No, nobody's him. But he is. There's only one. This is just, it's ridiculous to even compare because God is so much above. He's not overly concerned with things that we create, but he's concerned with us because he created us. And all throughout scriptures and all throughout our lives, he tries to turn our attention and our affections away from idols and toward him. And that's what he's doing here today. We get to the end of time. We see kingdom after kingdom rise and fall. We see God's word play out in prophecy. And we watch kingdoms rise and fall that we never thought would fall and that we never thought would rise. And here we get to the end, and the Bible says that there's still coming a kingdom that will arise in the days of these other kingdoms, of which we now live in. And God's message to humanity is, where is your heart? Where are your affections? Are they towards the kingdoms of this world that have always risen and fallen and risen and fallen? And in every generation, they got things and they lost things. And then they got things and then they put them in storage. And then they lost things. And somebody went to the storage auction and bought them for pennies on a dollar on a Saturday morning. Some of you guys have done that. He says, I just want to know where your heart is. He talked about his servant David in the Bible. He said, that's a man that's after my own heart. God knows. He is a discerner of the thoughts and the intent of our hearts. And he is doing that right now today. And so we're going to pray. Our kids are in from Sunday school. They're going to come in. And we have a short break. If you're new here, we do our preaching first, and then we have our worship time. And I want to encourage you to evaluate and consider the condition of your heart as we engage into this worship experience. Because it really is an experience. It should be an experience between us and God every time we come together. And we don't know what God's going to do, but we know that he's going to be here because he dwells among us. And he is for us right now.